so happy we alive.
Privacy, but at this juncture in the movement of unions, they have been very inadequate in this area. Thankfully, in the last 4 or 5 years, as negotiations for contracts have come up again that were originally done in the 1980s, they are starting to talk about this because they realize they're losing some of their very best people to drug testing. And one last point. A lot of people argue, and I had the pleasure of debating the former head of the DEA a few weeks ago up in Maine, who is himself along with the former head of NIDA, Robert DuPont, in the drug testing consulting business. He is quick to tell audiences that drug testing is really, and this was a great point that Barbara was bringing up, it is really the same as an airline security check. And of course, since I agree with Barbara that an airline security check is very close to a name regarding security, I wanted to bring this up with him. He and I, this former head of the DEA, Peter Benzinger, we fly quite often. And so he likes to make the analogy that drug testing is very much like a airline security checkpoint. I have 2 major problems with that. One is, yeah, if you go into a plane and go up into the, high altitude, the idea that somehow you're going into a pressurized cabin, of course nobody would want to have a bomb or incendiary device on there. That's a given, we can all accept that. But the other problem is that when you walk through that metal detector, it is detecting the metal on you, not the metal you might have had on you a month ago or 2 months ago, which is in essence all drug testing does. It does not measure for impairment, it only measures for past use. We have a couple moments. I'd like to just open up a couple of questions before we go to our next panel. If anybody had any questions for Barbara or about Normal's general drug testing policies and what we do, this is the time to do it. What we're going to get right here.
That's not. I put it on first. I am. Well, the back. Go to that question.
Hey, how about you?
There might be employees who might be selling drugs or doing drugs on the property, which might lead to a confiscation of the business under the asset forfeiture laws. Some of them might be doing this just to protect themselves.
I'm asking Alan for backup. Could a business be confiscated if employees on it were?
Well, there are some states that have passed laws that make it so that employees and even landlords are somewhat responsible for both their employees' actions and their tenants' actions. And so I think Ms. Wells' question is such that, and actually this comes up a lot when I talk to folks who own a business. What if you own, let's say, a bread delivery service, and you have a person go out and deliver bread that day, and for whatever reason, of no fault of their own, somebody backs into their truck? Well, they're going to have to take a drug test. And what if it actually got to a compensation hearing or some deliberative body like a jury? And in the end, the fulcrum, what the whole thing turned on was whether or not the truck driver had gone through a drug test or not. That might turn a little bit on liability, and much could be the same could be said for forfeiture. I don't know that an employer would lose their business for it, but the pressure, the inherent pressure to do so is such that it makes it so that people the employers have drug testing where they would not otherwise.
I heard you about a week ago on WBAI talking about rights. I was wondering if that might have anything to do with this drug testing, because you were so articulate and interesting on that about women and how there's discrimination against women. I wonder if that might have any bearing, any remote connection between that and this.
Well, insofar as women are also employees, and women and minorities are overrepresented in the low-wage part of the workforce. Not that drug testing doesn't go throughout it. I don't know if there's any. I wonder if anybody else here has thought about that. Whether there's any special angle for women in drug testing. The cases I have heard about, a lot of the complaints of the humiliation of the drug testing have come from women who find the protocol of, say, having to undress and pee in front of somebody, just really, humiliating, which I think is what it's meant to be. But other than that, I don't know, does anybody else have
Reminds me of
thoughts?
strip searches, how women are humiliated by strip searches.
Well, I would add that I've talked to probably dozens of women over the years who have, in the course of getting into an argument with their male manager, and in some cases over something as blatant as sex discrimination, that when they move down that avenue, what do they find waiting for them on Monday morning when they come in? An individualized drug test.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because that's more of the use of the drug test as a kind of punishment. It's sort of abandoning the notion that they achieve anything, that they're supposed to. It's just something mean we can do to you to show that we own you.
And by the way, there was a case litigated in Northern California where I believe the woman came out with about a $350,000 settlement for such wrongful actions.
Yeah, a gender element that's very obvious is in South Carolina, I'm sure many of you have heard of this, the state started drug testing, primarily African American women who were receiving medical assistance in childbirth, drug testing them, and if they tested positive, arresting them for child abuse, because in South Carolina the fetus is considered a child. That was recently upheld by the Fourth Circuit, which is a higher federal court. So right now in South Carolina and much of the eastern United States, including Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, a woman can give birth shackled to a bed, have her child taken away, and then go to prison because she tested positive for drugs.
Actually, further thought on that, there is at least one person here today. I hope Deneen Clark is in. Hi, Deneen. Yeah, you are. You're going to be in that line. Deneen, it represents one of many women in this country who have actually had the state go after and, in fact, take their child away simply because they tested positive for marijuana. To let you know how absurd this is getting down in Texas in a couple of different counties, what law enforcement and protective child services are doing is, and this is absolutely mind-blowing, yes, indeed, a woman who's giving birth has about that much civil rights. And yes, indeed, a baby has about that much in civil rights. But I ask you, how many civil rights does an afterbirth have? Yeah, because they're being tested. The afterbirth, the placenta is being tested. And if it comes up positive, in the one case I'm familiar with, not only did this woman lose the child that she gave birth to, but she lost custody of her other 4 children with no deliberative process. And there was the Texas Protective Service Agency to take all 5 children away. So this is something we've been working on, particularly Tom Dean, NORML's litigation director, and his previous cohort, Tanya Kangas. NORML is one of the central receiving points of just that kind of information, and we were so proud and so happy to be able to represent, to a large degree, Deneen's child, aptly named Justice. Robert, another question?
Yes, I wanted to comment. I think you got to realize when you work for somebody that you really become a wage slave. And, that's the fact of life. But on some of the things you said, I'm not quite sure that's the whole picture. Because there are cracks in the wall. For instance, down in Virginia, some of the unions have said, we'll do drug testing except marijuana. Okay? And so there's an example. When we buy software, right, we're supposed to buy from drug-free vendors, and we say, well, nah, we'll forget that part of it. But the federal government, if you sell anything over $25,000, which doesn't really amount to much. I mean, that's like a paperclip supply. A hammer supply. But, any $25,000 contract with the government has the drug-free clause or drug policy clause. The other thing I'm very curious about, and this is contrary to my own experience, is the ACLU report on